Yes, indeedy, folks. It's the Beer Drinker's Guide to the Great Wahoo. Folks, it is the perfect time to cab. Here it is, the last day of July, and that means it is the perfect time to begin our celebrating August in Boise. Folks, tomorrow is going to be August at last. I love August in Boise. Dry, beautiful air, the crickets chirping. It's hot. It's just so wonderfully hot. There's really nothing to do except go sit in your lawn and drink iced coffee and read if you want to and snooze if you can't think of anything else to do. It is just heaven. Floating the river. I spend all winter being cold. I spend most of fall and spring being closed up in the house. And finally comes beautiful August. We can sleep with our windows open. We live in this beautiful valley where we have hardly any bugs to bother us in the summer. It's just great. And I love to get my bones just so soaked up with heat that when that first little hint of coolness is in the air come September, you think, well, that does feel pretty good. I guess that it's been hot long enough. You know, we have these winters that get cold long enough so that it gets to where the warmth feels good. And I like it to get hot enough so that you really appreciate that little bit of cool that comes along in the fall. So, tomorrow is the first day of August. At least it is if they're playing these programs in the order I give them to them. And let's celebrate it. Well, one of the things that makes it so we can celebrate it in this valley, of course, is that unlike most deserts, we have a very big attribute coming right through the middle of our desert that makes it so that we can go play in the middle of the heat and thoroughly celebrate it. And that very big attribute, of course, is our beautiful Boise River. A Class A trout stream running right through a city and through a long valley. I certainly know I'm not the only person who has celebrated August doing this activity. As we all know, in the middle of August, you can practically walk across the river from one raft to the next. Another thing I love about the summertime and August in Idaho and here in Boise is going out and driving in the countryside and seeing these beautiful, beautiful green fields and watching them as they barely turn green in the spring and mature through the summer into harvest. But of course, folks, beautiful green fields is not what this country is about. We live in a desert. This whole country looks like our mountains do in the summer and looks like what we see between here and Mountain Home, except for one very simple little thing. And that simple little thing that is so easy to take for granted, of course, is water. As you know, here in the valley, we spend all winter and very seldom see a snow that is much more than this. In fact, our annual precipitation for an average here in the valley, adding up all the snow and all the rain we get, is 8 inches. That means if you put a bucket in your backyard and we're able to catch all the water that lands in the valley for a year, for a typical average year, and none of it evaporated and it never got spilled and the neighbor's cat never came and drank any of it, then you would have about 8 inches of water in your bucket at the end of the year. A friend of mine who moved to Boise Valley from Wisconsin commented one day that he had watched a TV show, a weather show, and this was after it had rained about the first time he was in town. And they mentioned that we had gotten 2/100ths of an inch of rain. Well, we kind of take it for granted that people would report on 2/100ths of an inch of rain. But believe me, folks, for a guy from Wisconsin, that sounded very, very odd. He couldn't believe that we could even measure 2/100ths of an inch of rain. And when you think about it, it is kind of odd. After all, what is 2/100ths of an inch of rain? Something like a dewdrop or something? I don't know. But they do measure them. And here in this valley, where we get 8 inches of rain a year, a few 100ths of an inch of rain is something that we measure. However, trust me, in the rest of the world, most people don't. I was once in the Midwest, in Indiana, I believe, and we went out to see this cornfield that was behind my friend's house. And he looked at it and he says, yeah, it's kind of dry. He says, need a couple inches of water. And he kind of looked in this absolutely perfectly blue sky and said, we'll get it. Well, I didn't see any irrigation ditches, but you know, when in Rome, do as the Romans, and I didn't worry about it. Well, that evening we were sitting out on the porch, and the fireflies were out, which I'll tell you, once you've seen fireflies, you just have to, it's like seeing the ocean. You just have to go back and check them out every once in a while. That's one of the reasons I was there, really. And there were bugs around, and there were some cats running around, and there were different things just kind of doing what they do in the evening. And off, way, way, way off in the distance, there was a thunderstorm going on. And this huge black cloud with never less than 6 fingers of lightning under it. It was just, you could tell that it was a big, big storm. And it was just rest of the cloud sky all around it, absolutely blue. No clouds in the sky except this one. And it was headed our way. So we sat and we watched it come. And I kept watching all this lightning under it because I'm used to storms here where you might get a few lightning bolts and you kind of sit there waiting for them. But this one, you weren't waiting for lightning bolts. They were always under it. As the storm got close enough to where you started to feel the atmosphere change for it, all of a sudden the lightning bugs just settled down. And all the bugs settled down. And you didn't see any cats or anything else running around. The whole world just kind of went still just as this atmosphere changed. And within a minute, the storm just smack. It was just brrr. It was rattling the house, and it was thundering, and it was lightninging, and it was just dumping buckets of rain. Buckets. I mean, it was just going on. And it did that for 15 or 20 minutes, just rattling everything. And then all of a sudden it tapered off after over about a minute. And it went on its way. And we went outside. And of course everything was drenched. But there was no water running around. It had just soaked into the ground. And the bugs started to come back up. And the cats started to walk around. And life just went about its way. They had gotten 2 inches of rain in 15 or 20 minutes. And I have many times been in the Midwest and up in the Dakotas and places like that, where all of a sudden they'll just get 2 inches of rain in 20 minutes. That's how they irrigate. They don't have canals. Well, folks, if we ever had 2 inches of rain in Boise in 20 minutes, we would be in a pickle. I once saw here in Boise, I saw it rain 1 inch in 2 hours. Now, 1 inch in 2 hours is an entirely different barrel of monkeys than 2 inches in 20 minutes. When it rained 1 inch in 2 hours here in Boise, the street in front of my house was flowing like a river up over the sidewalk. It was just getting rid of water as fast as it could. Our storm drains are not made to handle that much water. In the Midwest, they are, but ours aren't. Our hills are not made to absorb that. It just runs off and the sand comes down into the valley. There is nothing in our valley that is set up for that kind of water. Well, that's because we live in a desert and we usually get 8 inches of rain a year, and we measure our water by hundredths of an inch. And our plants are glad to get it. That sandy soil out there sucks up every bit of that 1/100th of an inch and is glad to get it. And that's why in the spring we talk about how green our hills are. My niece was once visiting. She's from the Portland area, and I once commented how green our hills were in May. And she just burst out laughing. She thought that was the funniest thing she had ever heard. She thought that her crazy old coot Uncle Dean was over the top. Anyway, in our valley, we get 8 inches of rain a year. And that is why we live in a desert. Ah, but it is quite a unique desert, and let's go find out why. What makes our desert unique is right up there on top of the mountains. While here in Boise, we get 1 or 2 inches of snow in a winter, just a few miles from us up at Bogus Basin, they get 80 to 100 inches in a winter. And that goes all the way back to the Sawtooth Mountains, where they get more and more snow. While here in the valley, in an average year, we get 8 inches of water, up in the mountains from which we get our water, they get an average of 24 inches, 3 times the amount of water. Not only does our watershed get 3 times as much water as we get here on the desert valley floor, the Boise River collects this 24 inches of water from a huge area. A watershed is the area that drains into any particular river or creek or whatever it is that the water is shedding into that system. The Boise River watershed includes most of the southern part and the western part of the Sawtooth mountain range, and of course, everything in between. In all, the Boise River watershed, getting those average of 24 inches of water a year, is 4,100 square miles of land, taking in those 24 inches of water and gathering them together for this valley. So, of course, the question is, exactly how big is 4,100 square miles? To get a grip on that, let's go look at states in the Union. A good place to start when you're thinking about something like a watershed is, what is the smallest state in the Union? Well, the smallest state in the Union is Rhode Island. Rhode Island is 1,545 square miles. In other words, the Boise River watershed is 2.65 times larger, more than 2.5 times larger than the state of Rhode Island. What's the next largest state in the Union? Well, it's Delaware. Delaware is 1,954 square miles. Our watershed, what brings water into the Boise River, is more than 2 times larger than the size of the second largest state in the nation. Let's add the 2 smallest states in the nation together. Rhode Island and Delaware together are 3,499 square miles. Our watershed is still larger than those 2 states put together. It's 17% larger than that. I got curious and looked up the population of these 2 states. Together they are right around 2 million people. The state of Idaho has 1.5 million people in it. So these two states that together are smaller than our watershed support a good third more people than the whole state of Idaho. In Idaho, the Boise River watershed is 5% of the state of Idaho. To find a state with more square miles than the watershed of the Boise River, we have to go to Connecticut. The third largest state in the nation, Connecticut, has 5,440 square miles, which is an area that the Boise River watershed would consume 74% of, a full 3/4 of the state of Connecticut. And that is the story of the Boise River watershed. The story of why we can live in a desert with 8 inches of rain a year and enjoy it being green and having a beautiful river to go play in all summer long in the heat of the dog days of summer. A watershed that averages 24 inches a year over a 4,100 square mile vast area that gathers it in to our valley. Next week, we'll go look at taking this watershed, putting it on the land, and putting it in the river for us to play in. Let's drive Moab. In the spring of 2007, I went exploring Moab. On past adventures, we have gone exploring Highway 6 and the trains that run along it. And when we first got to Moab, we went down Highway 279 along the river, a very beautiful drive. The next day, we went out Highway 313, headed toward Canyonlands, and stopped by Dead Horse Point, a Utah state park. Before we went exploring the Canyonlands National Park, we stopped and looked at the little road that goes from the end of 279 up to where the Canyonlands National Park is, a place called Schaefer Road, a very dramatic little dirt road. Your beer drinker guide got so busy talking about this dramatic road that we didn't have time until the next week to go out and start exploring Canyonlands National Park. We spent a couple weeks exploring this amazing place, this amazing island in the sky, and all the different scenery that you can catch of the Green River and the Colorado River flowing by on both sides. Today we are leaving the Canyonlands National Park and heading back on Highway 313. Throughout the day of exploring Dead Horse Point and Canyonlands National Park, there had been clouds all over the sky and dramatic storms, and those storms had not only been off in the distance, we had experienced a few. So, driving back on Highway 313 just outside the park, I was not at all surprised to find some snow alongside the road. Again, this was the last week of March 2007. Ah, you know how I love these steep, windy roads and through such amazing country. After getting back to Moab, I stopped by the hotel, got freshened up, and went to eat at a little place that had caught my eye when I first drove into town. On the north end of town, there's this lovely little shack up on the hill that says, "Come on up and eat with a view." So I decided that'd be a good idea. It turns out this house has a rich history, all thanks to a guy named Charles A. Steen. Charles Steen, in the late 40s, found himself with 3 kids under 4, one more on the way, a beautiful wife named Minnie Lee, and no prospects for a future. At the time, the Cold War was just getting cranked up real good, and the United States government was concerned about a supply of uranium for fuel and for nuclear bomb purposes. They declared only the United States government could buy uranium, and they artificially inflated the price of it to where it was worth much, much more than any other ore that you could mine. So Steen went to his mom, borrowed $1,000, went and bought a used diamond mining drill, and went out with his own ideas as to where you find uranium. He couldn't afford a Geiger counter or any of the other expensive equipment that people were using to find uranium, so he went by the seat of his pants with his own theories, and his theories were well known around the valley as Steen's Folly. That guy out there with his own ideas as to where you find uranium. For 2 years, Charles and his beautiful wife, Minnie Lee, and their 4 kids that were under 5 years of age roamed around the desert around Moab, living in a tar paper shack while he was prospecting for uranium. During those 2 years, he fed his family on poached venison and cereals. I'm sure Minnie Lee came to have several concerns about that husband of hers. But the family stuck with it, and on July 6th, 1952, one of Charles's claims looked a little promising. He named the claim Mi Vida for my life, and Mi Vida became one of the richest uranium discoveries in the world. Yielded over $60 million. Well, folks, Charles and Minnie Lee and their 4 sons had no trouble at all adjusting to the millionaire's lifestyle. He built this $250,000 house that is done in a style to remind him of the tar paper shack that they had lived in for 2 years, just outside of Moab, with a beautiful view, with swimming pool, servants' quarters, and all the other amenities that he could think of. He loved to throw big parties for the whole town in an airplane hangar. He made large contributions to the local hospital, and every week he got on his private plane and went up to Salt Lake City for rumba lessons. He also had a 3-foot-tall pair of bronze Discovery boots made in honor of the boots he was wearing when he discovered Mi Vida, a prospector's boots, after supporting a family of 5 off of poached venison while you go exploring for your possible dream. Today we can see these boots at the Sunset Grill, which has been built in his house overlooking Moab. The Sunset Grill, dining with $1 million view. Much of what they do at the Sunset Grill is remember Charles and Minnie Lee and their life, with many of the memorabilia that the family had gathered along its way. But before you get to the view, and before you get to see the memorabilia, you get to enjoy an even more fun road than Highway 313. This chewed up little piece of 1-lane macadam rises up to the restaurant in a stunning and bumpy and potholy manner that makes the dining all the more fun. When the United States government no longer needed so much uranium at the end of the 50s, they dropped the price on it, and Steen lost his money. He tried other enterprises, including horse breeding, marble quarrying, airplane factorying, and a pickle plant. But in 1968, he was forced to declare bankruptcy. In 1971, he suffered a severe head injury while he was out prospecting for copper. Minnie Lee died in 1997, and Charles died in Loveland, Colorado on January 1st, 2006. After surviving the drive up Steen's driveway, we arrive at the Sunset Grill and enjoy a lovely dinner overlooking Moab. The menu is in the $15 to $25 range, with things like prime rib, honey pecan chicken, Idaho trout, and other delights. Dinner includes not only the lovely view, but soup or salad, starch, and vegetable. A lady was telling her friend, "I am such a generous spirit, just today I gave a bum $100. Her friend asked, "Well, what did your husband have to say about that?" To which she replied, "Well, he said thank you." And that's this week's Beer Drinker's Guide to the Great Wahoo. Thanks for joining me. Hope to see you next week when we'll go exploring up the Colorado River from Moab. And we'll go exploring more about the Boise River and our amazing watershed. Until then, keep celebrating the Great Wahoo!